Well, hello and good evening. I'm Sam and you are listening to Chilliteracy, where I still have the Christmas decorations up. You can't stop me. It's still cold, so technically it's still winter. It's still Christmas even. Of course, it's still winter. Doesn't winter actually technically start in January? Or something? I don't know. Look, I'm very tired and confused. Hello, everybody. Hey, Perella. Lady Mephistopheles, thank you. Thank you for pressing the button. 15 months of continued button pressing. Much appreciated. Good to see you. And everybody else who has shown up for this. Yeah, so as I was saying in chat, I was trying to find a... Actually, first I'm just going to do a background noise check. 1 second. Ooh, there's a little bit coming through the microphone there. I'm just going to try repositioning a little bit away from the laptop, see if that helps. A little bit of a difference. Okay. Yeah, I was just looking on Project Gutenberg for a text to link in chat. And it turns out that Gutenberg is down. I noticed this earlier. I was thinking it was just going to be like an afternoon's blip. But no, it turns out it's not. They've been having problems since yesterday. Salad, I see you saying it's slow for you, but it does work. Okay, yeah, like it's not... It hasn't been working for me, so I guess, yeah, it's a little bit luck of the draw. I have found a different different version, which has just such a long URL because it's just a link to the PDF, and it looks like a mess. But let's put that there anyway for people to use for now. Yeah, I apologise for the absolute word salad of that. It's yeah, I'm not referring to you, Majestic Salad. Word salad of a URL that is there. But yeah, I guess we'll use that for this week and hope that Gutenberg's back next week. But before we get to that, hello everybody, welcome in. How are you all? I hope everybody is well. Arian, do you stay awake a bit more and get more tea? You think you might? Well, I mean, that is your call. But yeah, I have a new book that we are starting today, and in kind of a rarity actually. It's not a terribly printed copy of the book. It's not like amazing, but it's actually someone's put in some effort to actually lay this out and format it, and include all of the text. Which stands it above some of the other copies that we've read, frankly, or that I've read at least, because I'll pick them up cheap from wherever. Unfortunately, you do always feel addressed when people say salad, also in regular conversation. Oh no. Yeah, I realised when I said that, it's like, oh wait, no, hang on, you're probably going to think I'm addressing you, but no, you're good. But yes, hello, hi, welcome in. I am Sam. And yeah, tonight we should be kind of technically starting. Well, we are starting a new book, but it is a continuation-ish. I'm still not entirely sure why it's counted as a trilogy. Of the Trilogy of the Abyss by William Hope Hodgson, which began with The Boats of the Glen Carrig, and was about some marooned survivors of seemingly some kind of nautical mishap. And their escapades on an island where things were weird, and there's because he wrote 3 of them. Thank you, Lucy. That's super informative. Like from what I read of this, because I pre-read things before putting them up on stream. From what I've read of this, I can sort of see thematically where they tie together, and so I'm curious, like if that's it. Obviously, I'm not going to say what and spoil things. Pardon stomach noise if that came through. Yeah, I'm not going to say what happens in this that made me go, oh, okay, maybe that's the connection. I'm not sure. But it's, I was thinking, if you call it a trilogy, then me personally, I would expect some very clear elements to tie things together, like it is. Like it is different people maybe getting involved in the same events, or sort of people who are connected to characters or events or plot elements from the first one, And so far this seems wholly different, but with thematic similarities. Like weed men, exactly. Damn weed men. But yes, hello, welcome. I've said that a few times now. How's everybody doing? What have you been up to? Before I get into the reading, let's just chat. Spin seat round. Let's rap for a bit, kids. They all have secret Stan Lee cameos, obviously. Well, yes, that is true. The Hodgson cinematic universe pulls all these things together through the power of Stan Lee. Yeah. What's poppin', yo? Ka-chow. Thanks for asking. I've just had my head stuck in VR for various amounts of time this week. It turns out Half-Life Alyx, I'm not going to bang on about it for too long, but it's very, very good. And as I have learned in the last couple of days, I kind of really want nothing more in life than to have Rhys Darby just like talking in my ear, narrating things, just commenting on stuff, describing in extensive detail how to make a club sandwich, in his sort of chipper tones. It's great. I didn't know he was in the game, and it's immediately the best part. Glad to see you still got the Christmas decorations up. You haven't gotten around to putting your tree away either. Yeah, exactly. I put them up pretty late on the stream in December anyway, so I feel like I should keep them around a little bit for to really like get the most for our money. Really. You tried VR exactly once, but you got dizzy using it. It will do that, yes. Yeah, it can definitely do that. One of your buns was ill earlier today, so there was some worry and care for her, but she's better now. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, obviously I'm glad that she's doing better. But, wait, did you say she? They? She, yes, she. Yeah, I'm glad she's doing better, but yeah, sorry for the distress that caused. I know full well how much distress a visibly ill, unwell pet, how much that can bring. So yeah, I'm glad that's turned out all right. Erin, you keep yours up for a long time too. Yeah, I know it's bad luck beyond 12th night. When they set out those rules, did they apply to stream decorations? I don't think Twitch.tv had been invented. It wouldn't be invented for at least another 15 years from when they set out those rules. So we're probably fine. I think we miss out. We're okay. Once every Christmas tree up until May. Did it take root? May, the other M month. That's not even March. That is not 3 months, that's 5. Wow. I mean, that's impressive. Like, was there a point at which you considered maybe we just leave this up till next year, just save ourselves some effort next December? The idea of seasonal decorations, yeah, that's what you said, Erin. You winter decorations or Christmas decorations. It's not a bad idea. Like, kind of go a little bit Stardew on the house and just put stuff up. To be like, yeah, you know what? It's summer now, so we're going to put up the summer colours. Why is it bad luck? I cannot answer that one, but I'm sure someone else can or will. It's probably one of those things that it's like, oh, it's bad luck. Why? Because is it pagan bad luck? Christians going, no. It does it say it in the Bible? It doesn't. But it's bad luck. Is it because it's a pagan festival? No. No. Stop asking, please. One of those things, I'm guessing. It's probably, yeah, exactly. It's religious and yeah. Do I have anything else to talk about? I don't know. Probably not. Joey will obviously no doubt interrupt us this evening. He had a case of the zoomies earlier, to the to the degree where I was worried that probably during stream he will not just come into the room and howl and scream for attention, but likely just throw himself onto the desk and press buttons on the laptop. So he did seem to calm down a little bit because I gave him some cuddles, but yeah, he may be a liability. The tradition that it is bad luck to keep decorations up after Twelfth Night and the Epiphany is a modern invention, said Dr. Michael Carter, English Heritage's senior properties historian, though it may derive from the medieval notion that decorations left up after Candlemas Eve would become possessed by goblins. Oh, of course, goblins. Right. Well, that's cool. You're basically a goblin yourself. Well, I wasn't going to say it. But, yeah. So, now that I've crossed the line, just gonna stretch and crack some things. I'm not even on a break and I'm already stretching. Look at that go. Right. Shall we read a story? Trying to think if there's anything I need to point out or call out before I start this. I didn't encounter anything in what I've read that made me feel like a content warning was strictly necessary, so I think we're probably okay on that front. I will say the first half. First, I've not timed it out to know exactly where the breaks are going to come and stuff, so that we might be a little bit early or late on that. I don't know. The first half I read probably somewhere about a month ago now, so I absolutely do not recall a word of it. So there may be some bits that I intended to edit a little bit. I'm not sure. I don't think there was, but it's possible, and if I come upon something like that suddenly in the last second I have to think around or reword, that I didn't actually just write into the text myself, as I will do, then I may have to struggle and pause for a second and just do some off the cuff editing. It's probably fine. I'm pretty sure it's fine. I think we're okay. So the only thing that I will say is that so far as I've read it, this is a story by an English author, and it is set in Ireland. I believe the characters, the protagonists that he is writing about are themselves English, and it was written in what year was this? Published in 1908. So, just gonna sort of preface a bit there that I again, from what I have read and what I have seen, he's not full of the, I guess sadly, typical anti-Irish racism from the time, but just sort of want to put out that I kind of got a little bit of the impression of seeing kind of these characters, at least. I don't know Hodgson's own views on the Irish, but yeah, there was perhaps a little bit of a perception that the Irish folk around them are on a slightly lower keel, which, it's not cool. I wish people wouldn't do that and didn't do that, and that wasn't the history that we have established. So yeah, I say there wasn't anything that to me read as massively egregious, but also I'm kind of ignorant on a lot of that stuff. So just kind of putting that out there really is hey, please be advised. Yeah, that's sort of as far as that goes, I think. Obviously, if there's some sort of subtext that I'm completely missing, do please tell me, so I can be advised. Thank you. But yeah, I think with all that said, all the rambling done, you're just planning other stuff in chat. That's cool. Yeah, I'm gonna start reading. So, the views of the authors and characters do not reflect the views of Chilliteracy Incorporated. Yes, exactly. And as I say, where possible, we try to actually take that content out, or just straight up not read a book if it's Lovecraft. But yes, it's entirely possible for us to miss things that we are that ignorant of. But yeah, that's that's a lot of talking done. There's a little bit of a poem here before we even start. So, I shall begin. If we are ready and everybody is comfy and warm and cozy and you have appropriate pets scattered liberally around you. Would your literacy be an incorporated company or an LLC? I do not know enough to answer that one for you. But yeah, I'm gonna start reading. So if we are ready, we shall begin The House on the Borderland by William Hope Hodgson. To my father, whose feet tread the lost aeons, open the door and listen. Only the wind's muffled roar and the glisten of tears round the moon, and in fancy the tread of vanishing shoon out in the night with the dead. Hush and hark to the sorrowful cry of the wind in the dark. Hush and hark without murmur or sigh to shoon that tread the lost aeons, to the sound that bids you to die. Hush and hark, hush and hark. Shoon of the dead. Author's Introduction to the Manuscript. Many are the hours in which I have pondered upon the story that is set forth in the following pages. I trust that my instincts are not awry when they prompt me to leave the account in simplicity as it was handed to me. And the missive itself. You must picture me when first it was given into my care, turning it over curiously and making a swift, jerky examination. A small book it is, but thick, and all, save the last few pages, filled with a quaint but legible handwriting and writ very close. I have the queer, faint, pit-water smell of it in my nostrils now as I write, and my fingers have subconscious memories of the soft, cloggy feel of the long damp pages. I read, and, in reading, lifted the curtains of the impossible that blind the mind, and looks out into the unknown. Amid stiff, abrupt sentences I wandered, and presently I had no fault to charge against their abrupt tellings, for, better far than my own ambitious phrasing, is this mutilated story capable of bringing home all that the old recluse of the vanished house had striven to tell. Of the simple, stiffly given account of weird and extraordinary matters I will say little. It lies before you. The inner story must be uncovered personally by each reader according to ability and desire. And even should any fail to see, as now I see, the shadowed picture and conception of that to which one may well give the accepted titles of heaven and hell, yet can I promise certain thrills merely taking the story as a story. William Hope Hodgson, December 17th, 1907. I read, and in reading, not I read, but anyway, we shall carry on. Chapter 1. The Finding of the Manuscript. Right away, in the west of Ireland, lies a tiny hamlet called Creighton. It is situated alone at the base of a low hill. Far around there spreads a waste of bleak and totally inhospitable country, where, here and there, at great intervals, one may come upon the ruins of some long, desolate cottage, unthatched and stark. The whole land is bare and unpeopled, the very earth scarcely covering the rock that lies beneath it, and with which the country abounds, in places rising out of the soil in wave-shaped ridges. Yet, in spite of its desolation, my friend Tonneson and I elected to spend our vacation there. He had stumbled on the place by mere chance the year previously, during the course of a long walking tour, and discovered the possibilities for the angler in a small and unnamed river that runs past the outskirts of the little village. I have said that the river is without name. I may add that no map that I have hitherto consulted has shown either village or stream. They seem to have entirely escaped observation. Indeed, they might never exist for all that the average guide tells one. Possibly this can be partly accounted for by the fact that the nearest railway station, Ardrahan, is some 40 miles distant. It was early one warm evening when my friend and I arrived in Creighton. We had reached Ardrahan the previous night, sleeping there in rooms hired at the village post office, and leaving in good time on the following morning, clinging insecurely to one of the typical jaunting cars. It had taken us all day to accomplish our journey over some of the roughest tracks imaginable, with the result that we were thoroughly tired and somewhat bad-tempered. However, the tent had to be erected and our goods stowed away before we could think of food or rest, and so we set to work, with the aid of our driver, and soon had the tent up upon a small patch of ground just outside the little village, and quite near to the river. Then, having stored all our belongings, we dismissed the driver, as he had to make his way back as speedily as possible, and told him to come across us at the end of a fortnight. We had brought sufficient provisions for us to last that space of time, and water we could get from the stream. Fuel we did not need, as we had included a small oil stove among our outfit, and the weather was fine and warm. It was Tonnyson's idea to camp out instead of getting lodgings in one of the cottages. As he put it, there was no joke in sleeping in a room with a numerous family of healthy Irish in one corner and a pigsty in the other, while overhead a ragged colony of roosting fowls distributed their blessings impartially, and the whole place so full of peat smoke that it made a fellow sneeze his head off just to put it inside the doorway. Tonnyson had got the stove lit now and was busy cutting slices of bacon into the frying pan, so I took the kettle and walked down to the river for water. On the way, I had to pass close to a little group of the village people who eyed me curiously, but not in any unfriendly manner, though none of them ventured a word. As I returned, with my kettle filled, I went up to them and, after a friendly nod, to which they replied in like manner, I asked them casually about the fishing, but instead of answering they just shook their heads silently and stared at me. I repeated the question, addressing more particularly a great gaunt fellow at my elbow. Yet again I received no answer. Then the man turned to a comrade and said something rapidly in a language that I did not understand, and at once the whole crowd of them fell to jabbering in what, after a few moments, I guessed to be pure Irish. At the same time they cast many glances in my direction. For a minute, perhaps, they spoke among themselves thus. Then the man I had addressed faced round at me and said something. By the expression of his face, I guessed that he, in turn, was questioning me, but now I had to shake my head and indicate that I did not comprehend what it was they wanted to know, and so we stood looking at one another, until I heard Tonnyson calling to me to hurry up with the kettle. Then, with a smile and a nod, I left them, and all in the little crowd smiled and nodded in return, though their faces still betrayed their puzzlement. Sorry, Joey's howling at the door, so I need to let him in. 1 sec. In you come. It begins. I'm blaming him for the distractions. It was evident, I reflected as I went toward the tent, that the inhabitants of these... What? Really? Do you want to read? No? Are you sure? You seem to want to. You're coming up. That's my leg. Are you coming up? I'm going to carry on. It was evident, I reflected as I went toward the tent, that the inhabitants of these few huts in the wilderness did not know a word of English. And when I told... Neither do you. And when I told Tonnyson, he remarked that he was aware of the fact, and more, that it was not at all uncommon in that part of the country, where the people often lived and died in their isolated hamlets without ever coming in contact with the outside world. I wish we had got the driver to interpret for us before he left, I remarked as we sat down to our meal. It seems so strange for the people of this place to not even know what we've come for. Tonnyson grunted an assent, and thereafter was silent for a while. Later, having satisfied our appetites somewhat, we began to talk, laying our plans for the morrow. Then, after a smoke, we closed the flap of the tent and prepared to turn in. "I suppose there's no chance of those fellows outside taking anything?" I asked, as we rolled ourselves into our blankets. Tonneson said that he did not think so, at least while we were about. And, as he went on to explain, we could lock up everything except the tent in the big chest that we had brought to hold our provisions. I agreed to this, and soon we were both asleep. Next morning, early, we rose and went for a swim in the river, after which we dressed and had breakfast. Then we roused out our fishing tackle and overhauled it, by which time, our breakfasts having settled somewhat, we made all secure within the tent and strode off in the direction my friend had explored on his previous visit. During the day we fished happily, working steadily upstream, and by evening we had one of the prettiest creels of fish that I had seen for a long while. Returning to the village, we made a good feed off our day's spoil, after which, having selected a few of the finer fish for our breakfast, we presented the remainder to the group of villagers who had assembled at a respectful distance to watch our doings. They seemed wonderfully grateful, and heaped mountains of what I presumed to be Irish blessings upon our heads. Thus we spent several days, having splendid sport and first-rate appetite to do justice upon our prey. We were pleased to find how friendly the villagers were inclined to be, and that there was no evidence of their having ventured to meddle with our belongings during our absences. It was on a Tuesday that we arrived in Creighton, and it would be on the Sunday following that we made a great discovery. Hitherto we had always gone upstream. On that day, however, we laid aside our rods and, taking some provisions, set off for a long ramble in the opposite direction. The day was warm, and we trudged along leisurely enough, stopping about midday to eat our lunch upon a great flat rock near the riverbank. Afterward we sat and smoked a while, resuming our walk only when we were tired of inaction. For perhaps another hour we wandered onward, chatting quietly and comfortably on this and that matter, and on several occasions stopping while my companion, who is something of an artist, made rough sketches of striking bits of the wild scenery. And then, without any warning whatsoever, the river we had followed so confidently came to an abrupt end, vanishing into the earth. "Good Lord," I said, "whoever would have thought of this?" And I stared in amazement. Then I turned to Tonneson. He was looking with a blank expression upon his face at the place where the river disappeared. In a moment he spoke. "Let us go on a bit. It may reappear again. Anyhow, it's worth investigating." I agreed, and we went forward once more, though rather aimlessly, for we were not at all certain in which direction to prosecute our search. For perhaps a mile we moved onward. Then Tonneson, who had been gazing about curiously, stopped and shaded his eyes. "See," he said after a moment, "isn't that mist or something over there to the right, away in a line with that great piece of rock?" And he indicated with his hand. I stared, and after a minute seemed to see something, but could not be certain, and said so. "Anyway," my friend replied, "we'll just go across and have a glance." And he started off in the direction he had suggested, I following. Presently we came among bushes and, after a time, out upon the top of a high, boulder-strewn bank, from which we looked down into a wilderness of bushes and trees. "Seems as though we had come upon an oasis in this desert of stone," muttered Tonneson as he gazed interestedly. Then he was silent, his eyes fixed, and I looked also, for up from somewhere about the centre of the wooded lowland there rose high into the quiet air a great column of haze-like spray, upon which the sun shone, causing innumerable rainbows. "How beautiful!" I exclaimed. And so did Joey. "Yes," answered Tonneson thoughtfully. "There must be a waterfall or something over there. Perhaps it's our river come to light again. Let's go and see." What are you doing? Are you counting? What are you doing? Let's have a long blanket. Go on. Oh, you want to come over? Okay. 1 second. No. Yeah, you asked. You got picked up. Okay, goodbye. You didn't want to be picked up. Perhaps it's our river come to light again. Let's go and see. Down the... For goodness sake. Okay, you're being cute, I know. Down the sloping bank we made our way and entered among the trees and shrubberies. Are we done? Okay. He just wants to join in. The bushes were matted, and the trees overhung us so that the place was disagreeably gloomy. Oh no, my stomach's getting on it. Great. Though not dark enough to hide from me the fact that many of the trees were fruit trees, and that, here and there, one could trace indistinctly signs of a long-departed cultivation. Thus, it came to me that we were making our way through the riot of a great and ancient garden. I said as much to Tonneson, and he agreed that there certainly seemed reasonable grounds for my belief. What a wild place it was, so dismal and sombre. Somehow, as we went forward, a sense of the silent loneliness and desertion of the old garden grew upon me, and I felt shivery. One could imagine things lurking among the tangled bushes. Excuse me 1 second. One could imagine things lurking among the tangled bushes, while in the very air of the place there seemed something uncanny. I think Tonneson was conscious of this also, though he said nothing. Suddenly we came to a halt. Through the trees there had grown upon our ears a distant sound. Tonneson bent forward, listening. I could hear it more plainly now. It was continuous and harsh, a sort of droning roar seeming to come from far away. I experienced a queer, indescribable little feeling of nervousness. What sort of place was it into which we had got? I looked at my companion to see what he thought of the matter, and noted that there was only puzzlement in his face, and then, as I watched, his features an expression of comprehension crept over them, and he nodded his head. "That's a waterfall," he exclaimed with conviction. "I know the sound now." And he began to push vigorously through the bushes in the direction of the noise. As we went forward, the sound became plainer continually, showing that we were heading straight toward it. Yes. Steadily the roaring grew louder and nearer until it appeared, as I remarked to Tonneson, almost to come from under our feet, and still we were surrounded by the trees and shrubs. "Take care," Tonneson called to me. "Look where you're going." And then, suddenly we came out from among the trees onto a great open space where, not 6 paces in front of us, yawned the mouth of a tremendous chasm, from the depths of which the noise appeared to rise, along with the continuous mist-like spray that we had witnessed from the top of the distant bank. For quite a minute we stood in silence, staring in bewilderment at the sight. Then my friend went forward cautiously to the edge of the abyss. I followed, and, together we looked down through a boil of spray at a monster cataract of frothing water that burst, spouting from the side of the chasm, nearly 100 feet below. "Good Lord," said Tonneson. I was silent and rather awed. The sight was so unexpectedly grand and eerie, though this latter quality came more upon me later. Presently I looked up and across to the further side of the chasm. There I saw something towering up among the spray. It looked like a fragment of a great ruin, and I touched Tonneson on the shoulder. He glanced round with a start, and I pointed toward the thing. His gaze followed my finger, and his eyes lighted up with a sudden flash of excitement as the object came within his field of view. "Come along," he shouted above the uproar. "We'll have a look at it. There's something queer about this place. I feel it in my bones." And he started off round the edge of the crater-like abyss. As we neared this new thing, I saw that I had not been mistaken in my first impression. It was undoubtedly a portion of some ruined building. Yet now I made out that it was not built upon the edge of the chasm itself, as I had first supposed, but perched almost at the extreme edge of a huge spur of rock that jutted out some 50 or 60 feet over the abyss. In fact, the jagged mass of ruin was literally suspended in mid-air. Arriving opposite it, we walked out on to the projecting arm of rock, and I must confess to having felt an intolerable sense of terror as I looked down from that dizzy perch into the unknown depths below us, into the deeps from which there rose ever the thunder of the falling water and the shroud of rising spray. Reaching the ruin, we clambered round it cautiously, and, on the further side, came upon a mass of fallen stones and rubble. The ruin itself seemed to me, as I proceeded now to examine it minutely, to be a portion of the outer wall of some prodigious structure. It was so thick and substantially built. Yet what it was doing in such a position I could by no means conjecture. Where was the rest of the house, or castle, or whatever there had been? I went back to the outer side of the wall, and thence to the edge of the chasm, leaving Tonneson rooting systematically among the heap of stones and rubbish on the other side. Then I commenced to examine the surface of the ground, near the edge of the abyss, to see whether there were not left other remnants of the building, to which the fragment of ruin evidently belonged. But though I scrutinized the earth with the greatest care, I could see no signs of anything to show that there had ever been a building erected on the spot, and I grew more puzzled than ever. Then I heard a cry from Tonneson. He was shouting my name, excitedly, and without delay I hurried along the rocky promontory to the ruin. I wondered whether he had hurt himself, and then the thought came that perhaps he had found something. I reached the crumbled wall and climbed round. There I found Tonneson standing within a small excavation that he had made among the debris. He was brushing the dirt from something that looked like a book, much crumpled and dilapidated, and opening his mouth every second or two to bellow my name. As soon as he saw that I had come, he handed his prize to me, telling me to put it into my satchel so as to protect it from the damp, while he continued his explorations. This I did, first, however, running the pages through my fingers, and noting that they were closely filled with neat, old-fashioned writing which was quite legible, save in one portion, where many of the pages were almost destroyed, being muddied and crumpled as though the book had been doubled back at that part. This, I found out from Tonneson, was actually as he had discovered it, and the damage was due, probably, to the fall of masonry upon the opened part. Curiously enough, the book was fairly dry, which I attributed to its having been so securely buried among the ruins. Having put the volume away safely, I turned to and gave Tonneson a hand with his self-imposed task of excavating. Yet, though we put in over an hour's hard work, turning over the whole of the upheaped stones and rubbish, we came upon nothing more than some fragments of broken wood that might have been parts of a desk or table. And so we gave up searching and went back along the rock, once more to the safety of the land. The next thing we did was to make a complete tour of the tremendous chasm, which we were able to observe was in the form of an almost perfect circle, save for where the ruin-crowned spur of rock jutted out, spoiling its symmetry. The abyss was, as Tonneson put it, like nothing so much as a gigantic well or pit going sheer down into the bowels of the earth. For some time longer we continued to stare about us, and then, noticing that there was a clear space away to the north of the chasm, we bent our steps in that direction. Here, distant from the mouth of the mighty pit by some hundreds of yards, we came upon a great lake of silent water. Silent, that is, save in one place where there was a continuous bubbling and gurgling. Now, being away from the noise of the spouting cataract, we were able to hear one another speak without having to shout at the tops of our voices, and I asked Tonneson what he thought of the place. I told him that I didn't like it, and that the sooner we were out of it, the better I should be pleased. He nodded in reply, and glanced at the woods behind furtively. I asked him if he had seen or heard anything. He made no answer, but stood silent, as though listening, and I kept quiet also. Suddenly he spoke. "Hark!" he said, sharply. I looked at him, and then away among the trees and bushes, holding my breath involuntarily. A minute came and went in strained silence, yet I could hear nothing, and I turned to Tonneson to say as much. And then, even as I opened my lips to speak, there came a strange wailing noise out of the wood on our left. It appeared to float through the trees, and there was a rustle of stirring leaves, and then silence. All at once, Tonneson spoke and put his hand on my shoulder. "Let us get out of here," he said, and began to move slowly toward where the surrounding trees and bushes seemed thinnest. As I followed him, it came to me suddenly that the sun was low, and that there was a raw sense of chillness in the air. Tonneson said nothing further, but kept on steadily. We were among the trees now, and I glanced around nervously, but saw nothing save the quiet branches and trunks and the tangled bushes. Onward we went, and no sound broke the silence except the occasional snapping of a twig under our feet as we moved forward. Yet, in spite of the quietness, I had a horrible feeling that we were not alone, and I kept so close to Tonneson that twice I kicked his heels clumsily, though he said nothing. A minute, and then another, and we reached the confines of the wood, coming out at last upon the bare rockiness of the countryside. Only then was I able to shake off the haunting dread that had followed me among the trees. Once, as we moved away, there seemed to come again a distant sound of wailing, and I said to myself that it was the wind, yet the evening was breathless. Presently, Tonneson began to talk. "Look you," he said with decision, "I would not spend the night in that place for all the wealth that the world holds. There is something unholy, diabolical about it. It came to me all in a moment, just after you spoke. It seemed to me that the woods were full of vile things, you know." "Yes," I answered, and looked back toward the place, but it was hidden from us by a rise in the ground. "There's the book," I said, and I put my hand into the satchel. "You've got it safely?" he questioned, with a sudden access of anxiety. "Yes," I replied. "Perhaps," he continued, "we shall learn something from it when we get back to the tent. We had better hurry, too. We're a long way off still, and I don't fancy now being caught out here in the dark." It was 2 hours later when we reached the tent, and, without delay, we set to work to prepare a meal, for we had eaten nothing since our lunch at midday. Supper over, we cleared the things out of the way and lit our pipes. Then Tonneson asked me to get the manuscript out of my satchel. This I did, and then, as we could not both read from it at the same time, he suggested that I should read the thing out loud. "And mind," he cautioned, knowing my propensities, "don't go skipping half the book." Yet, had he but known what it contained, he would have realized how needless such advice was, for once at least. And there, seated in the opening of our little tent, I began the strange tale of The House on the Borderland, for such was the title of the missive. This is told in the following pages. Chapter 2. The Plain of Silence. I am an old man. I live here in this ancient house, surrounded by huge, unkempt gardens. The peasantry, who inhabit the wilderness beyond, say that I am mad. That is because I will have nothing to do with them. I live here alone, with my old sister, who is also my housekeeper. We keep no servants. I hate them. I have one friend, a dog. Yes, I would sooner have old Pepper than the rest of creation together. He, at least, understands me, and has sense enough to leave me alone when I am in my dark moods. I have decided to start a kind of diary. It may enable me to record some of the thoughts and feelings that I cannot express to anyone. But beyond this, I am anxious to make some record of the strange things that I have heard and seen during many years of loneliness in this weird old building. For a couple of centuries, this house has had a reputation, a bad one, and until I bought it for more than 80 years, no one had lived here. Consequently, I got the place at a ridiculously low figure. I am not superstitious, but I have ceased to deny that things happen in this old house, things that I cannot explain, and therefore I must needs ease my mind by writing down an account of them to the best of my ability. Though, should this, my diary, ever be read when I am gone, the readers will but shake their heads and be the more convinced that I was mad. This house, how ancient it is, though its age strikes one less, perhaps, than the quaintness of its structure, which is curious and fantastic to the last degree. Little curved towers and pinnacles, with outlines suggestive of leaping flames, predominate, while the body of the building is in the form of a circle. I have heard that there is an old story, told amongst the country people, to the effect that the devil built the place. However, that is as may be. True or not, I neither know nor care, save as it may have helped to cheapen it ere I came. I must have been here some 10 years before I saw sufficient to warrant any belief in the stories current in the neighbourhood about this house. It is true that I had, on at least a dozen occasions, seen vaguely things that puzzled me and perhaps had felt more than I had seen. Then, as the years passed, bringing age upon me, I became often aware of something unseen, yet unmistakably present, in the empty rooms and corridors. Still, it was, as I have said, many years before I saw any real manifestations of the so-called supernatural. It was not Halloween. If I were telling a story for amusement's sake, I should probably place it on that night of nights. But this is a true record of my own experiences, and I would not put pen to paper to amuse anyone. No. It was after midnight, on the morning of the 21st day of January. I was sitting, reading, as is often my custom, in my study. Pepper lay sleeping near my chair. Without warning, the flames of the 2 candles went low, and then shone with a ghastly green effulgence. I looked up quickly, and as I did so, I saw the lights sink into a dull, ruddy tint, so that the room glowed with a strange, heavy crimson twilight that gave the shadows behind the chairs and tables a double depth of blackness. And wherever the light struck, it was as though luminous blood had been splashed over the room. Down on the floor, I heard a faint, frightened whimper, and something pressed itself between my 2 feet. It was Pepper, cowering under my dressing gown. Pepper, usually as brave as a lion. It was this movement of the dog's, I think, that gave me the first twinge of real fear. I had been considerably startled when the lights burnt first green and then red, but had been momentarily under the impression that the change was due to some influx of noxious gas into the room. Now, however, I saw that it was not so, for the candles burned with a steady flame and showed no signs of going out, as would have been the case had the change been due to fumes in the atmosphere. I did not move. I felt distinctly frightened, but could think of nothing better to do than wait. For perhaps a minute I kept my glance about the room nervously. Then I noticed that the lights had commenced to sink very slowly, until presently they showed minute specks of red fire, like the gleamings of rubies in the darkness. Still, I sat watching, while a sort of dreamy indifference seemed to steal over me, banishing altogether this fear that had begun to grip me. Away, in the far end of the huge old-fashioned room, I became conscious of a faint glow. Steadily it grew, filling the room with gleams of quivering green light. Then they sank quickly and changed, even as the candle flames had done, into a deep, sombre crimson that strengthened and lit up the room with a flood of awful glory. The light came from the end wall and grew ever brighter until its intolerable glare caused my eyes acute pain, and involuntarily I closed them. It may have been a few seconds before I was able to open them. The first thing I noticed was that the light had decreased greatly, so that it no longer tried my eyes. Then, as it grew still duller, I was aware all at once that instead of looking at the redness, I was staring through it and through the wall beyond. Gradually, as I became more accustomed to the idea, I realized that I was looking out onto a vast plain, lit with the same gloomy twilight that pervaded the room. The immensity of this plain scarcely can be conceived. In no part could I perceive its confines. It seemed to broaden and spread out so that the eye failed to perceive any limitations. Slowly the details of the nearer portions began to grow clear. Then, in a moment almost, the light died away, and the vision, if vision it were, faded and was gone. Suddenly, I became conscious that I was no longer in the chair. Instead, I seemed to be hovering above it and looking down at a dim something huddled and silent. In a little while a cold blast struck me and I was outside in the night, floating like a bubble up through the darkness. As I moved, an icy coldness seemed to enfold me, so that I shivered. After a time, I looked to right and left and saw the intolerable blackness of the night, pierced by remote gleams of fire. Onward, outward I drove. Once I glanced behind and saw the earth, a small crescent of blue light receding away to my left. Further off, the sun, a splash of white flame, burned vividly against the dark. An indefinite period passed. Then, for the last time, I saw the earth, an enduring globule of radiant blue, swimming in an eternity of ether. And there I, a fragile flake of soul dust, flickered silently across the void, from the distant blue into the expanse of the unknown. A great while seemed to pass over me, and now I could nowhere see anything. I had passed beyond the fixed stars and plunged into the huge blackness that waits beyond. All this time I had experienced little save a sense of lightness and cold discomfort. Now, however, the atrocious darkness seemed to creep into my soul, and I became filled with fear and despair. What was going to become of me? Where was I going? Even as the thoughts were formed, there grew against the impalpable blackness that wrapped me a faint tinge of blood. It seemed extraordinarily remote and mist-like, yet at once the feeling of oppression was lightened, and I no longer despaired. Slowly the distant redness became plainer and larger, until, as I drew nearer, it spread out into a great sombre glare, dull and tremendous. Still I fled onward, and presently I had come so close that it seemed to stretch beneath me like a great ocean of sombre red. I could see little, save that it appeared to spread out interminably in all directions. In a further space, I found that I was descending upon it, and soon I sank into a great sea of sullen, red-hued clouds. Slowly I emerged from these, and there, below me, I saw the stupendous plain that I had seen from my room in this house that stands upon the borders of the silences. Presently I landed, and stood surrounded by a great waste of loneliness. The place was lit with a gloomy twilight that gave an impression of indescribable desolation. Afar to my right, within the sky, there burnt a gigantic ring of dull red fire, from the outer edge of which were projected huge, writhing flames, darted and jagged. The interior of this ring was black, black as the gloom of the outer night. I comprehended at once that it was from this extraordinary sun that the place derived its doleful light. From that strange source of light I glanced down again to my surroundings. Everywhere I looked, I saw nothing but the same flat weariness of interminable plain. Nowhere could I descry any signs of life, not even the ruins of some ancient habitation. Gradually, I found that I was being borne forward, floating across the flat waste. For what seemed an eternity, I moved onward. I was unaware of any great sense of impatience, though some curiosity and a vast wonder were with me continually. Always I saw around me the breadth of that enormous plain, and always I searched for some new thing to break its monotony, but there was no change. Only loneliness, silence, and desert. Presently, in a half-conscious manner, I noticed that there was a faint mistiness, ruddy in hue, lying over its surface. Still, when I looked more intently, I was unable to say that it was really mist, for it appeared to blend with the plain, giving it a peculiar unrealness, and conveying to the senses the idea of unsubstantiality. Gradually, I began to weary with the sameness of the thing, yet it was a great time before I perceived any signs of the place toward which I was being conveyed. At first I saw far ahead like a long hillock on the surface of the plain. Then, as I drew nearer, I perceived that I had been mistaken, for instead of a low hill, I made out now a chain of great mountains, whose distant peaks towered up into the red gloom until they were lost to sight. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 2, and where we should take a break. But first of all, thank you to Longest Dave. Fine streamer extraordinaire. I don't know where I'm going with that one. Dave, thank you very much for the raid. Welcome in, you and your raiders. I hope that you had a good time playing the Portal mod. I hope it was fun and a good time. I'm repeating myself. Well, Dave has been shouted out, but yes, if you are here and somehow do not know who Dave is, then do please click on that link and give him a follow. Very good person, lovely guy. You're probably still not around, but in case you are, I do need to thank you for my Christmas present, because I realised that I forgot to do that. Dave made me a really cool Christmas present. It's like a little character stand for my D&D character. It's like stats and info and stuff. It's really nice. Thank you. If you're not here, I'll just thank you next time I speak to you. But yes, I'm going to take a break. So I encourage and invite you all to do the same. Our advice is usually move around a bit, stretch what you got, cycle those fluids, and be back here in about 5 minutes or so for more of this cosmic horror. It's great. I'm loving it. See you in a bit. Bye for now. I don't know why I'm talking like that. Hi, hello. I'll sit and witter away for a minute while people filter back in and stuff. Just check my message on my phone because like literally as soon as I started reading, a whole bunch of notifications started firing off on my phone. I think it's just like social activities for the going live posts and things. But yeah, how are we doing so far? Is everybody enjoying the story? I hope so. I am. I think it's really good. This certainly feels like the most cosmic horror of the Hodgson stuff that we've read, certainly. Very well timed return. Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, I did glance up and see the comments early on about I'm just going to read it rather than try and paraphrase it. It's so strange that Irish people speak Irish in Ireland, says the Englishman in Ireland. Yeah, native English speakers in non-English speaking countries really be like that. Yeah, it's... Sadly, I don't know, like, me, that it I want to read that satirically as, like... I would like to believe that, any author worth their salt is writing these characters with the express intention of going, look at these jackasses. But I feel like because Hodgson is kind of framing one of these characters as himself, as far as I can tell, I'm not entirely sure. It's a bit odd because it's like... Because, like, as you sound like the framing device. So, like, the first framing device is... I, William Hope Hodgson, the author of the book that you hold in your hand, was handed the missive that you are about to read. And then we go into the story from two people travelling through Ireland in a little bit of a three men in a boat style escapade. Them themselves, like, having a wander around and finding this weird place with the house, and then finding the manuscripts, and what we are reading now is them reading it aloud to themselves in an account that will then be passed on to Hodgson. So that's like, how removed is he from? Is he one of these three men in a boat as cosmic horror? Right? I mean, it's public domain. We can write that. We can do that. I want to do that. Lucy, are you there? Can we write that, please? Can we have that one? Yeah, I need that now. But yeah, it's like, I'm assuming from the way that this is set out, Hodgson is not placing himself as one of these two people. He's not Tonneson, obviously. So is it like him? Is it him and his friend Tonneson, or is Tonneson and our narrator? Are they two different people who then, like, found and read the book and then handed it to their mate Billy Hopes? You'll add it to your really short list. I mean, I'm not saying you do it. I'm saying we, us, collaborative storytelling channel on the Discord. Okay, we could. That's not the worst idea I've ever read. To be not exactly fair but unfairly accurate, perhaps, Irish-speaking people in Ireland is unfortunately unusual to English people. Yeah. I did struggle with that sentence a bit, though. Apologies. But anyway, yeah, it sounds like people are back and enjoying the story. So, good luck. Good news, even. You've earned yourselves more. There's more story here. And we're going to get on with it in a second. Right, I'm just quickly going to work out probably where I'm going to be reading to. How long did that take? That was about 14 pages. And we look there. Okay. That might take us to... Yeah, that's quite a long chapter. We'll see. Just picking out a stopping point. Because your brain struggled with that sentence reading it back. Mood. Yeah, good grief. I lied. We're not going to read just yet. On the Longest John's short stories that have been coming up Because the penultimate one, the second to last one, went up. What's Saturday? Yes, went up yesterday. Diana's one. It's really good, but that means that the last one is going up next Friday, and that's the last one written by me. And I'm just gonna say it now. I really struggled with tenses in that one. Like I think I kept trying to write it past tense, and it kept pulling present. It was really weird. It's like, I want to say this. I literally do not know how to say this sentence in any other way. How to communicate this idea of things happening in any other way but this. But that's not how I want to. It was like a real back and forth struggle between what I wanted to say and how it would insist on being said. I think in the end, I'm going to say we managed to get there, because I was like, yeah, I finished it, handed it off to Lucy to look through and essentially edit for me. And we managed to turn it into something legible. But I'm curious how it's actually going to, like, how it's going to survive contact with the open air, basically, when people who aren't one of us two get to read it and go, yo, what? So that's going to be fun. Looking forward to that. But yeah, just to plug those stories for the Kickstarter again. Give them a look. I'm really proud of what everyone's like delivered and what you've managed to put together. Ray Tracer, hello, welcome. You have joined us as we've made our way through the framing devices for this cosmic horror, and we are now into an old man's first-hand account of the weird things that he has discovered whilst living in his house on the Borderland. Erin, you are yet to get to Diana's one, but you're excited. It's real good. You've been sorting Lego all day, and your brain is Lego and everything's Lego. Cool. If Lucy's paying attention, she's going to be in with a link. I'm not even going to say what it is. She knows what it is, and she's going to post it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Damn. Oh well. That'll be popping up in a second. The Lego house on the Lego Borderland. Yeah, but you think how much... You need to find it... Oh, okay, fair enough. You think how much a Lego house would cost? I don't know if it would be more... It would be... I think it would be more expensive than a regular house. Anyway. All this and more for you to deal with in chat while I continue reading. So, you know, I'm going to have some water. Depends if you need to be human size or not. Oh, yeah, like as a 1-to-1 scale Lego house made of Lego. Like a house for people to live in. You're not so sure of the fact you can't decide there's more about the state of Lego or the state of the housing market? That's exactly the point. Haha. Anyway, yes, right. I am going to carry on reading because we have some more to do. So, let us continue with William Hope Hodgson's The House on the Borderland. Chapter 3. The House in the Arena. And so, after a time, I came to the mountains. There, the course of my journey was altered, and I began to move along their bases, until, all at once, I saw that I had come opposite to a vast rift opening into the mountains. Through this I was borne, moving at no great speed. On either side of me, huge, scarped walls of rock-like substance rose sheer. Far overhead, I discerned a thin ribbon of red, where the mouth of the chasm opened among inaccessible peaks. Within was gloom, deep and sombre, and chilly silence. For a while I went onward steadily, and then, at last, I saw ahead a deep red glow that told me I was near upon the further opening of the gorge. A minute came and went, and I was at the exit of the chasm, staring out upon an enormous amphitheatre of mountains. Yet of the mountains, and the terrible grandeur of the place, I recked nothing. for I was confounded with amazement to behold, at a distance of several miles and occupying the centre of the arena, a stupendous structure built apparently of green jade. Yet in itself it was not the discovery of the building that had so astonished me, but the fact, which became every moment more apparent, that in no particular, save in colour and its enormous size, did the lonely structure vary from this house in which I live. For a while I continued to stare fixedly. Even then I could scarcely believe what I saw aright. In my mind a question formed, reiterating incessantly, "What does it mean? What does it mean?" And I was unable to make answer, even out of the depths of my imagination. I seemed capable only of wonder and fear. For a time longer I gazed, noting continually some fresh point of resemblance that attracted me. At last, wearied and sorely puzzled, I turned from it, to view the rest of the strange place onto which I had intruded. Hitherto, I had been so engrossed in my scrutiny of the house that I had given only a cursory glance round. Now, as I looked, I began to realize upon what sort of place I had come. The arena, for so I have termed it, appeared a perfect circle of about 10 to 12 miles in diameter, the house, as I have mentioned before, standing in the centre. The surface of the place, like to that of the plain, had a peculiar misty appearance that was yet not mist. From a rapid survey, my glance passed quickly upward along the slopes of the circling mountains. How silent they were! I think that this same abominable stillness was more trying to me than anything that I had so far seen or imagined. I was looking up, now, at the great crags towering so loftily. Up there, the impalpable redness gave a blurred appearance to everything. And then, as I peered, curiously, a new terror came to me. For away up among the dim peaks to my right, I had descried a vast shape of blackness, giant-like. It grew upon my sight. It had an enormous equine head with gigantic ears, and seemed to peer steadfastly down into the arena. There was that about the pose that gave me the impression of an eternal watchfulness, of having warded that dismal place through unknown eternities. Slowly, the monster became plainer to me, and then, suddenly, my gaze sprang from it to something further off and higher among the crags. For a long minute I gazed, fearfully. I was strangely conscious of something not altogether unfamiliar, as though something stirred in the back of my mind. The thing was black, and had 4 grotesque arms. The features showed indistinctly round the neck. Round the neck I made out several light-coloured objects. Slowly the details came to me, and I realized, coldly, that they were skulls. Further down the body was another circling belt, showing less dark against the black trunk. Then, even as I puzzled to know what the thing was, a memory slid into my mind, and straightway I knew that I was looking at a monstrous representation of Kali, the Hindu goddess of death. Other remembrances of my old student days drifted into my thoughts. My glance fell back upon the huge beast-headed thing. Simultaneously I recognized it for the ancient Egyptian god Set, or Seth, the destroyer of souls. With the knowledge, there came a great sweep of questioning. 2 of the... I stopped, and endeavoured to think. Things beyond my imagination peered into my frightened mind. I saw, obscurely, the old gods of mythology. I tried to comprehend to what it was all pointing. My gaze dwelt flickeringly between the 2. If... An idea came swiftly, and I turned and glanced rapidly upward, searching the gloomy crags away to my left. Something loomed out under a great peak, a shape of greyness. I wondered I had not seen it earlier, and then remembered I had not yet viewed that portion. I saw it more plainly now. It was, as I have said, grey. It had a tremendous head, but no eyes. That part of its face was blank. Now, I saw that there were other things up among the mountains. Further off, reclining on a lofty ledge, I made out a Further off, reclining on a lofty ledge, I made out a livid mass, irregular and ghoulish. It seemed without form save for an unclean, half-animal face that looked out vilely from somewhere about its middle. And then I saw others. There were hundreds of them. They seemed to grow out of the shadows. Several I recognized almost immediately as mythological deities. Others were strange to me, utterly strange, beyond the power of a human mind to conceive. On each side I looked and saw more continually. The mountains were full of strange things, beast gods and horrors so atrocious and bestial that possibility and decency deny any further attempt to describe them. And I was filled with a terrible sense of overwhelming horror and fear and repugnance. Yet, spite of these, I wondered exceedingly. Was there then, after all, something in the old heathen worship, something more than the mere deifying of men, animals, and elements? The thought gripped me. Was there? Later, a question repeated itself. What were they, those beast gods and the others? At first they had appeared to me just sculptured monsters placed indiscriminately among the inaccessible peaks and precipices of the surrounding mountains. Now, as I scrutinized them with greater intentness, my mind began to reach out to fresh conclusions. There was something about them, an indescribable sort of silent vitality that suggested to my broadening consciousness a state of life in death, a something that was by no means life as we understand it, but rather an inhuman form of existence that well might be likened to a deathless trance, a condition in which it was possible to imagine their continuing eternally. Immortal. The word rose in my thoughts unbidden, and straightway I grew to wondering whether this might be the immortality of the gods. And then, in the midst of my wondering and musing, something happened. Until then I had been staying just within the shadow of the exit of the great rift. Now, without volition on my part, I drifted out of the semi-darkness and began to move slowly across the arena, toward the house. At this, I gave up all thoughts of those prodigious shapes above me, and could only stare, frightenedly, at the tremendous structure toward which I was being conveyed so remorselessly. Yet, though I searched earnestly, I could discover nothing that I had not already seen, and so became gradually calmer. Presently, I had reached a point more than halfway between the house and the gorge. All around was spread the stark loneliness of the place and the unbroken silence. Steadily, I neared the great building. Then, all at once, something caught my vision, something that came round one of the huge buttresses of the house, and so into full view. It was a gigantic thing, and moved with a curious lope, going almost upright after the manner of a man. It was quite unclothed, and had a remarkable luminous appearance. Yet it was the face that attracted and frightened me the most. It was the face of a swine. Silently, intently, I watched this horrible creature, and forgot my fear momentarily in my interest in its movements. It was making its way cumbrously round the building, stopping as it came to each window to peer in and shake at the bars with which, as in this house, they were protected. And whenever it came to a door, it would push at it, fingering the fastening stealthily. Evidently it was searching for an ingress into the house. I had come now to within less than a quarter of a mile of the great structure, and still I was compelled forward. Abruptly, the thing turned and gazed hideously in my direction. It opened its mouth, and, for the first time, the stillness of that abominable place was broken by a deep, booming note that sent an added thrill of apprehension through me. Then, immediately I became aware that it was coming toward me swiftly and silently. In an instant it had covered half the distance that lay between, and still I was borne helplessly to meet it. Only 100 yards, and the brutish ferocity of the giant face numbed me with a feeling of unmitigated horror. I could have screamed, in the supremeness of my fear, and then, in the very moment of my extremity and despair, I became conscious that I was looking down upon the arena from a rapidly increasing height. I was rising. In an inconceivably short while, I had reached an altitude of many hundred feet. Beneath me, the spot that I had just left was occupied by the foul swine creature. It had gone down on all fours and was snuffing and rooting like a veritable hog at the surface of the arena. A moment, and it rose to its feet, clutching upward with an expression of desire upon its face, such as I have never seen in this world. Continually, I mounted higher. A few minutes, it seemed, and I had risen above the great mountains, floating alone, far in the redness. At a tremendous distance below, the arena showed dimly, with the mighty house looking no larger than a tiny spot of green. The swine thing was no longer visible. Presently I passed over the mountains, out above the huge breadth of the plain. Far away on its surface, in the direction of the ring-shaped sun, there showed a confused blur. I looked toward it indifferently. It reminded me somewhat of the first glimpse I had caught of the mountain amphitheatre. With a sense of weariness, I glanced upward at the immense ring of fire. What a strange thing it was. Then, as I stared, out from the dark centre there spurted a sudden flare of extraordinary vivid fire. Compared with the size of the black centre, it was as naught, yet in itself stupendous. With awakened interest I watched it carefully, noting its strange boiling and glowing. Then, in a moment, the whole thing grew dim and unreal, and so passed out of sight. Much amazed, I glanced down to the plain from which I was still rising. Thus I received a fresh surprise. The plain, everything had vanished, and only a sea of red mist was spread far below me. Gradually, as I stared, this grew remote, and died away into a dim, far mystery of red against an unfathomable night. A while, and even this had gone, and I was wrapped in an impalpable, lightless gloom. Chapter 4. The Earth. Thus I was, and only the memory that I had lived through the dark once before served to sustain my thoughts. A great time passed. Ages. And then a single star broke its way through the darkness. It was the first of one of the outlying clusters of this universe. Presently it was far behind, and all about me shone the splendour of the countless stars. Later, years, it seemed, I saw the sun, a clot of flame. Around it I made out presently several remote specks of light, the planets of the solar system. And so I saw the earth again, blue and unbelievably minute. It grew larger and became defined. A long space of time came and went, and then at last I entered into the shadow of the world, plunging headlong into the dim and holy earth night. Overhead were the constellations, and there was a crescent moon. Then, as I neared the earth's surface, a dimness swept over me, and I appeared to sink into a black mist. For a while, I knew nothing. I was unconscious. Gradually, I became aware of a faint, distant whining. It became plainer. A desperate feeling of agony possessed me. I struggled madly for breath and tried to shout. A moment, and I got my breath more easily. I was conscious that something was licking my hand. Something damp swept across my face. I heard a panting, and then again the whining. It seemed to come to my ears now with a sense of familiarity, and I opened my eyes. All was dark, but the feeling of oppression had left me. I was seated, and something was whining piteously and licking me. I felt strangely confused and instinctively tried to ward off the thing that licked. My head was curiously vacant, and for the moment I seemed incapable of action or thought. Then things came back to me, and I called Pepper, faintly. I was answered by a joyful bark, and renewed and frantic caresses. In a little while I felt stronger, and put out my hand for the matches. I groped about for a few moments blindly. Then my hand lit upon them, and I struck a light and looked confusedly around. All about me I saw the old, familiar things, and there I sat, full of dazed wonders, until the flame of the match burnt my finger, and I dropped it. While a hasty expression of pain and anger escaped my lips, surprising me with the sound of my own voice. After a moment, I struck another match, and, stumbling across the room, lit the candles. As I did so, I observed that they had not burned away, but had been put out. As the flames shot up, I turned and stared about the study, yet there was nothing unusual to see, and suddenly a gust of irritation took me. What had happened? I held my head with both hands and tried to remember. The great, silent plain and the ring-shaped sun of red fire. Where were they? Where had I seen them? How long ago? I felt dazed and muddled. Once or twice I walked up and down the room unsteadily. My memory seemed dulled, and already the thing I had witnessed came back to me with an effort. I have a remembrance of cursing peevishly in my bewilderment. Suddenly, I turned faint and giddy, and had to grasp at the table for support. During a few moments, I held on weakly, and then managed to totter sideways into a chair. After a little time I felt somewhat better, and succeeded in reaching the cupboard where, usually, I keep brandy and biscuits. I poured myself out a little of the stimulant and drank it off. Then, taking a handful of biscuits, I returned to my chair and began to devour them ravenously. I was vaguely surprised at my hunger. I felt as though I had eaten nothing for an uncountably long while. As I ate, my glance roved about the room, taking in its various details, and still searching, though almost unconsciously, for something tangible upon which to take hold among the invisible mysteries that encompassed me. Surely, I thought, there must be something, and in the same instant my gaze dwelt upon the face of the clock in the opposite corner. Therewith I stopped eating and just stared. For though its ticking indicated most certainly that it was still going, the hands were pointing to a little before the hour of midnight, whereas it was, as well I knew, considerably after that time when I had witnessed the first of the strange happenings I have just described. For perhaps a moment I was astounded and puzzled. Had the hour been the same as when I had last seen the clock, I should have concluded that the hands had stuck in one place while the internal mechanism went on as usual. But that would, in no way, account for the hands having travelled backward. Then, even as I turned the matter over in my wearied brain, the thought flashed upon me that it was now close upon the morning of the 22nd, and that I had been unconscious to the visible world through the greater portion of the last 24 hours. The thought occupied my attention for a full minute, then I commenced to eat again. I was still very hungry. During breakfast next morning I inquired casually of my sister regarding the date, and found my surmise correct. I had, indeed, been absent, at least in spirit, for nearly a day and a night. My sister asked me no questions, for it is not by any means the first time that I have kept to my study for a whole day, and sometimes a couple of days at a time, when I have been particularly engrossed in my books or work. And so the days pass on, and I am still filled with a wonder to know the meaning of all that I saw on that memorable night. Yet, well I know that my curiosity is little likely to be satisfied. Chapter 5. The Thing in the Pit. This house is, as I have said before, surrounded by a huge estate and wild and uncultivated gardens. Away at the back, distant by some 300 yards, is a dark, deep ravine, spoken of as the pit by the peasantry. At the bottom runs a sluggish stream, so overhung by trees as scarcely to be seen from above. In passing, I must explain that this river has a subterranean origin, emerging suddenly at the east end of the ravine and disappearing as abruptly beneath the cliffs that form its western extremity. It was some months after my vision, if vision it were, of the great plain, that my attention was particularly attracted to the pit. I happened one day to be walking along its southern edge, when, suddenly, several pieces of rock and shale were dislodged from the face of the cliff immediately beneath me, and fell with a sullen crash through the trees. I heard them splash in the river at the bottom, and then silence. I should not have given this incident more than a passing thought, had not Pepper at once begun to bark savagely, nor would he be silent when I bade him, which is most unusual behaviour on his part. Feeling that there must be someone or something in the pit, I went back to the house quickly for a stick. When I returned, Pepper had ceased his barks and was growling and smelling uneasily along the top. Whistling to him to follow me, I started to descend cautiously. The depth to the bottom of the pit must be about 150 feet, and some time as well as considerable care was expended before we reached the bottom in safety. Once down, Pepper and I started to explore along the banks of the river. It was very dark there due to the overhanging trees, and I moved warily, keeping my glance about me and my stick ready. Pepper was quiet now and kept close to me all the time. Thus, we searched right up the one side of the river without hearing or seeing anything. Then we crossed over, by the simple method of jumping, and commenced to beat our way back through the underbush. We had accomplished perhaps half the distance when I heard again the sound of falling stones on the other side, the side from which we had just come. One large rock came thundering down through the treetops, struck the opposite bank, and bounded into the river, driving a great jet of water right over us. At this, Pepper gave out a deep growl, then stopped and pricked up his ears. I listened also. A second later, a loud, half-human, half-pig-like squeal sounded from among the trees, apparently about halfway up the south cliff. It was answered by a similar note from the bottom of the pit. At this, Pepper gave a short, sharp bark, and, springing across the little river, disappeared into the bushes. Immediately afterward, I heard his barks increase in depth and number, and in between there sounded a noise of confused jabbering. This ceased, and in the succeeding silence there rose a semi-human yell of agony. Almost immediately Pepper gave a long-drawn howl of pain, and then the shrubs were violently agitated, and he came running out with his tail down, and glancing as he ran over his shoulder. As he reached me, I saw that he was bleeding from what appeared to be a great claw wound in the side that had almost laid bare his ribs. Seeing Pepper thus mutilated, a furious feeling of anger seized me, and, whirling my staff, I sprang across and into the bushes from which Pepper had emerged. As I forced my way through, I thought I heard the sound of breathing. Next instant, I had burst into a little clear space, just in time to see something livid white in colour disappear among the bushes on the opposite side. With a shout, I ran toward it. But though I struck and probed among the bushes with my stick, I neither saw nor heard anything further, and so returned to Pepper. There, after bathing his wound in the river, I bound my wetted handkerchief round his body, having done which, we retreated up the ravine and into the daylight again. On reaching the house, my sister inquired what had happened to Pepper, and I told her he had been fighting with a wildcat, of which I had heard there were several about. I felt it would be better not to tell her how it had really happened, though to be sure I scarcely knew myself, but this I did know, that the thing I had seen run into the bushes was no wildcat. It was much too big, and had, so far as I had observed, a skin like a hog's, only of a dead, unhealthy white colour. And then it had run upright, or nearly so, upon its hind feet, with a motion somewhat resembling that of a human being. This much I had noticed in my brief glimpse, and, truth to tell, I felt a good deal of uneasiness, besides curiosity, as I turned the matter over in my mind. It was in the morning that the above incident had occurred. Then, it would be after dinner as I sat reading that, happening to look up suddenly, I saw something peering in over the window ledge, the eyes and ears alone showing. "A pig, by Jove!" I said, and rose to my feet. Thus I saw the thing more completely, but it was no pig. God alone knows what it was. It reminded me vaguely of the hideous thing that had haunted the great arena. It had a grotesquely human mouth and jaw, but with no chin of which to speak. The nose was prolonged into a snout. Thus it was that with the little eyes and queer ears gave it such an extraordinary swine-like appearance. Of forehead there was little, and the whole face was of an unwholesome white colour. For perhaps a minute, I stood looking at the thing with an ever-growing feeling of disgust and some fear. The mouth kept jabbering inanely, and once emitted a half-swinish grunt. I think it was the eyes that attracted me the most. They seemed to glow, at times, with a horribly inhuman intelligence, and kept flickering away from my face, over the details of the room, as though my stare disturbed it. It appeared to be supporting itself by two claw-like hands upon the windowsill. These claws, unlike the face, were of a clay-brown hue, and bore an indistinct resemblance to human hands, in that they had 4 fingers and a thumb, though these were webbed up to the first joint, much as are a duck's. Nails it had also, but so long and powerful that they were more like the talons of an eagle than aught else. As I have said before, I felt some fear, though most of an impersonal kind. I may explain my feeling better by saying that it was more a sensation of abhorrence, such as one might expect to feel if brought in contact with something superhumanly foul, something unholy, belonging to some hitherto undreamt of state of existence. I cannot say that I grasped these various details of the brute at the time. I think they seemed to come back to me afterward, as though imprinted upon my brain. I imagined more than I saw as I looked at the thing, and the material details grew upon me later. For perhaps a minute I stared at the creature. Then, as my nerves steadied a little, I shook off the vague alarm that held me and took a step toward the window. Even as I did so, the thing ducked and vanished. I rushed to the door and looked round hurriedly, but only the tangled bushes and shrubs met my gaze. I ran back into the house and, getting my gun, sallied out to search through the gardens. As I went, I asked myself whether the thing I had just seen was likely to be the same of which I had caught a glimpse in the morning. I inclined to think it was. I would have taken Pepper with me, but judged it better to give his wound a chance to heal. Besides, if the creature I had just seen was, as I imagined, his antagonist of the morning, it was not likely he would be of much use. I began my search systematically. I was determined, if it were possible, to find and put an end to that swine thing. This was, at least, a material horror. At first I searched cautiously, with the thought of Pepper's wound in my mind, but as the hours passed and not a sign of anything living showed in the great lonely gardens, I became less apprehensive. I felt almost as though I would welcome the sight of it. Anything seemed better than this silence, with the ever-present feeling that the creature might be lurking in every bush I passed. Later, I grew careless of danger, to the extent of plunging right through the bushes, probing with my gun barrel as I went. At times, I shouted, but only the echoes answered back. I thought thus perhaps to frighten or stir the creature to showing itself, but only succeeded in bringing my sister out, to know what was the matter. I told her that I had seen the wildcat that had wounded Pepper, and that I was trying to hunt it out of the bushes. She seemed only half satisfied, and went back into the house, with an expression of doubt upon her face. I wondered whether she had seen or guessed anything. For the rest of the afternoon I prosecuted the search anxiously. I felt that I should be unable to sleep with that bestial thing haunting the shrubberies, and yet when evening fell, I had seen nothing. Then, as I turned homeward, I heard a short, unintelligible noise among the bushes to my right. Instantly I turned and, aiming quickly, fired in the direction of the sound. Immediately afterward I heard something scuttling away among the bushes. It moved rapidly, and in a minute had gone out of hearing. After a few steps I ceased my pursuit, realizing how futile it must be in the fast-gathering gloom, and so, with a curious feeling of depression, I entered the house. That night, after my sister had gone to bed, I went round to all the windows and doors on the ground floor, and saw to it that they were securely fastened. The precaution was scarcely necessary as regards the windows, as all of those on the lower story are strongly barred, but with the doors, of which there are 5, it was wisely thought, as not one was locked. Having secured these, I went to my study, yet somehow, for once, the place jarred upon me. It seemed so huge and echoey. For some time I tried to read, but at last, finding it impossible, I carried my book down to the kitchen, where a large fire was burning, and sat there. I dare say I had read for a couple of hours, when, suddenly, I heard a sound that made me lower my book and listen intently. It was a noise of someone rubbing and fumbling against the back door. Once the door creaked loudly, as though force were being applied to it. During those few short moments, I experienced an indescribable feeling of terror, such as I should have believed impossible. My hands shook, a cold sweat broke out on me, and I shivered violently. Gradually, I calmed. The stealthy movements outside had ceased. Then, for an hour, I sat silent and watchful. All at once the feeling of fear took me again, I felt as I imagine an animal must under the eye of a snake. Yet now I could hear nothing. Still, there was no doubting that some unexplained influence was at work. Gradually, imperceptibly almost, something stole on my ear, a sound that resolved itself into a faint murmur. Quickly it developed and grew into a muffled but hideous chorus of bestial shrieks. It appeared to rise from the bowels of the earth. I heard a thud, and realized in a dull, half-comprehending way that I had dropped my book. After that, I just sat. And thus the daylight found me, when it crept wanly in through the barred high windows of the great kitchen. With the dawning light, the feeling of stupor and fear left me, and I came more into possession of my senses. Thereupon I picked up my book and crept to the door to listen. Not a sound broke the chilly silence. For some minutes I stood there. Then, very gradually and cautiously, I drew back the bolt and, opening the door, peeped out. My caution was unneeded. Nothing was to be seen, save the grey vista of dreary, tangled bushes and trees, extending to the distant plantation. With a shiver, I closed the door and made my way quietly up to bed. And that brings us neatly to the end of the chapter, and where I shall finish reading tonight. Thank you for listening. So there you go. Yeah. And a reminder to everybody that, just in case, because I'd forgotten about it in between when I read the first bit and when I read the rest. The narrator of that bit at the very start of his account of what happened, says that he lives in his house with his sister and his dog Pepper. So when he talks about the dog ran off into the woods to try and confront the thing, I was like, oh no, don't kill the dog, please don't kill the dog. The dog seemingly makes it through the story, because at least these events anyway, because Pepper is written about from the perspective of the end of things. So yeah, obviously don't allow that to ruin any tension, but I appreciate that for a lot of people, also nothing bad ever happens to dogs. Probably true. But yeah, we're all in the worrying about the pets getting hurt bit, but I think we get through it okay on that front. I mean, seemingly everyone involved survives, but yeah, there you go. That's the first part, The House on the Borderland. I really like this. I think this is really good. You appreciate me addressing the topic? No problem at all. Yeah, I'm not going to address previous instances of things going wrong for animals, but it's not something I like, frankly. I like it's, unless it's just like deeply upsetting. I don't feel like it's something that would necessarily put me off reading a good story. But yeah, it's not something I enjoy, and it's something I like to at least warn and foreshadow about, to let people know, because it's a distressing and upsetting topic. So yeah, you're welcome. No problem at all. But yeah, that is that. So because he's now in that bit addressed and described the pigmen. Firstly, it is funny to me how at least Hodgson, but I guess maybe some of the others, when trying to envision and describe some sort of monstrous figure, it seems like the imagination of the time, or certainly of the authors that we've read, extends as far as, so it's like a man, but what if it had the face of an animal? That's pretty messed up, right? And everyone goes, ooh. So, Hodgson, more like Hodgson, am I right? Yeah, right? Boom, got him. Horse of the Invisible. It's like there's this weird horse or like man with a horse head thing going round. Ah, so spooky. Or there's a one literally like the hog or something like that. What was it? Yeah, like I don't know. Maybe he hadn't a particularly unfortunate encounter with a pig as a child, and that just meant like pigs are spooky, man. Whenever I get the opportunity, pig's going to be the antagonist. But where I was saying at the start that, good night, Angeline. Thank you for being here. Take care. Sleep well. Or you've got stuff to do. You're not going to bed, obviously. But, goodbye. Yeah, be well. What was I saying? Yeah, where I was saying at the start that they're treated as a trilogy. Boats of the Glencarrig, House in the Borderland, and the Ghost Pirates, I think, is the third one. And, like, within the story itself, there doesn't seem to be anything, like, that follows on. Like, this isn't... These characters and these events aren't connected to anything, as far as I can tell, that happens in the Boats of the Glencarrig. Lummy, you taking your dog out for a midnight walk? Okay. Have fun with that. Good luck. Look after that dog. It's a very cool dog. Wasn't there one of the Karnaki stories about a hog? Yes, there was indeed. I actually have the book beside me. I think it was just literally called The Hog? Something like that. I think it might have been. Yes, The Hog, 1947. There you go. Presumably published. Whoops, that stuff falling over. Don't mind noises. I don't know. As I say, maybe he just found pig spooky, and who can begrudge him that? But so my feeling so far, in terms of like what would class this as, like, in the same vein as Borderland, like. Not Borderland, so this is Borderland, in the same vein as Boats of the Glencarrig, is you have, I guess, this... It's like I suppose, a continuation of that theme of, frankly, spooky, weird, extremely pale white animal-faced creatures coming out of perfectly circular holes in the ground. Maybe something like that, I don't know. And so I feel like that perhaps sort of established that, like... Well, the first one sort of establishing, there's some weird stuff out there that we don't understand, and it kind of lives underground, and it's going to get you. And then this, perhaps, is a little bit more of a building upon that idea, so to speak. House structures, house building, that wasn't really an intended pun, but we saw it and we took it anyway. Maybe something like that. Like, obviously, I've not really read much further than this part. So I don't know, but that's my immediate feeling. But this certainly feels like it is going a lot more into the cosmic horror. Like, there are impossibly big, unimaginably inscrutable things that exist out there, to which we are... To say that we are small and insignificant is nothing. That kind of seems to be perhaps where he's going with this, more than probably anything else of his that I've read. That's cool. That's a good theme to see come in. But I think that has brought us to the end of the stream. Who is on? Is Billiam is on? We could always pop over and see Billiam. That's always nice. Should we go see Billiam? Let's. Right. Good. Raid is set up. So, yes, thank you all for being here. You have been a wonderful and lovely audience as ever. If you're listening on YouTube, hey, and you're not following or subscribed over there, then chuck us a subscribe, or maybe come over to Twitch if you want to catch it live and say things in chat. Lucy, in theory, should be back next Wednesday. with some more short stories and things. I don't know what I will be doing next Saturday. I might be reading next Saturday, or I might not. I will probably have to decide a bit closer to the time, but we'll let you know on the socials or the Discords. Because, funnily enough, there was actually a significance date that is mentioned exactly in what I have just read. If you go back and listen to it, you will hear a date that is coming up called out. So, yeah. I don't know. We'll see. But yes, thank you all for being here. Look after yourselves and the people around you. Go give your pets a hug. And we will see you on the next one. Goodbye and good night.